Welcome to the latest podcast from Three Takes on AI. On today's podcast, Mike takes the lead on a discussion about a recent article about the 12 questions boards should be asking about AI. Listen or watch our lively conversation and subscribe and join us at threetakesonai.com or follow us on Spotify.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon when you're watching this. Welcome to episode 17 of Three Takes on AI. Our subject today is coming off of an article that came from AI Leadership Edge, and it was the 12 questions that your board should be asking when they deploy AI. And this one really caught my attention because some of the things that are on the list we've talked about on the podcast in the past, about things like governance and who's responsible when AI gets things wrong. But then there were other items on the list that I don't think we've comprehended or talked about on this podcast, but boy, are they important. And I actually shared them with one of my clients who is an AI technology company. And the reaction was, oh, these are really good questions, both internally and externally. So the questions, I'll run down the list really quickly, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. So the first question is, where does AI change our economics, not just our workflows? Second question is, which AI native competitor could rebuild our offering without our costs? 3, do we have an AI strategy or a pile of pilots? 4, which rules actually apply to us in every market we operate in, and who owns each one? 5, where could an AI system inside the company or inside our product make a decision we are legally accountable for? 6, how exposed are we if a single AI vendor fails, changes terms, or triples its prices? 7, where are our people putting confidential data into public AI right now? 8, who can see our data and who trains on it? 9, could we audit how an AI system reached an answer we acted on? 10, is this board AI literate enough to challenge management on any of the above? 11, what is our plan for the people whose roles AI compresses? And 12, when an AI system gets it wrong, who is accountable, and is that written down? So if the hair didn't stand up on the back of your neck as I read that list, good for you. But I suspect that there are very, very few companies in the world that have answered even a third of these 12. I will turn it over to you, Brian.
The one that struck me right away was the AI vendor failure. And one of the reasons is it finally dawned on me at one point, how quickly now OpenAI and Anthropic and everyone comes out with new models. And if you have an application tied to a model, how easy is it to migrate from one model to the next? So I saw something out there about you should have a plan so that it's easy to move from model to model when the terms change. And the reality is you can't. So you can't. ChatGPT, OpenAI came out with a reasoning model, right, and within its models, and that changed the game. And so the previous application probably would need to be redeveloped. We certainly would not, in a traditional IT world, move from one vendor to another without consideration of the result, right? So the idea that the vendors are coming out with more efficient models, but they're accelerating token usage at the same time, and costs are unpredictable. And truthfully, what happened, we can foresee at some point these leading vendors are going to, one of them or two of them will fail, because if you go back to e-commerce, the early days of e-commerce, I don't know any vendor that's still leading the charge in that space. So there are going to be times where that kind of consideration and governance is something that I had not really started to think about until very recent.
And
Well,
And sorry, Brian, and that is it's a good point and one that I don't want to over-index on it, but at the same time, this is an incredibly volatile market space right now. So the likelihood of an AI vendor that's a startup or relative startup, I'll say sub $10 million in revenue, surviving and thriving to a point where they are, a long-term supplier to your company without being acquired or going out of business is pretty high. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Ken. Sorry.
yeah, no, I mean, the questions are great. The 12 questions I found start to open up the lens a little bit more for the impact that organizations and boards need to be accountable for. But what I still didn't see, you alluded to it on, I think on the first one, the economics, internal and external, but there's no acknowledgement of societal impact, internal, external. There's no real reference to what HR, impacts to HR and to the cultural aspects of an organization
mm,
to incorporate AI into the organization. The 12 questions still, to my mind, still seem to isolate AI as a separate project, a separate aspect to the organization. And what we're seeing, we've talked about this. What we've seen is organizations that are really being successful are actually re-architecting and changing the processes by which they do business, adapting overall policies more broadly within the organization, not just from a technical perspective. So I think that it, the questions go in the right direction, that it starts to make people think more broadly, but I think it still needs to be even larger because again, I've said this many times. The issue that we have with AI is its ability to seem to have intimacy with the people that use it and or how it's incorporated in and sort of implemented within an organization. And it has certain business aspects that, Brian, you alluded to the one. What happens if my vendor changes? We've seen it in the EU, where organizations that negotiated a contract, a vendor contract, like back in 23, 24, now have major exposure to the EU AI Act compliance requirements because their contractual agreements weren't future proof to a certain degree. So there's a series of things that occur down at the fundamentals as well that a board needs to be aware of. And the last thing I want to say on sort of this go around of the observations is it's all well and good to the board to know that they've, let's say, answered those 12 questions, and that they've adopted AI into their risk register. They have people that are identified as having certain responsibility within different lines of business for the technology being adopted. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the controls. The controls have to be able to put the brakes on. There has to be the ability to know. The board has to fundamentally know that if a agent goes rogue, an AI system hallucinates, uh, that it is fundamentally stopped. There's a kill switch.
Yeah.
And it's not just that it's on paper, and it's
mm,
not that it's on a checklist, but they actually know that if misuse occurs or things go wrong very fast, that there needs to be the ability to actually have physical and or actual controls with the people that have responsibility. And I didn't necessarily see that being drawn out explicitly in the questions, but I think it sort of sits there
I
implicitly.
I agree. It's not explicitly drawn out, and it should be, probably should be question 13. I think it's wrapped in a few different questions. Um, One is, well, what does this do to the rules that it compresses? And then the other part of that is, well, what rules actually apply to us in every market we operate in? Which also is inclusive of, and we've talked about this on prior podcasts, having an AI policy manual. So actually mandating what people are allowed to utilize for tools, how they utilize them in different markets for mid-sized, larger companies, based on a person's role or level. What AI solutions are they allowed to select and implement on their own, if any? Understanding the ramifications on employees in different markets, because every market, United States, Canada, France, UK, has very different and very specific rules as it relates to treatment of employees and treatment of data as it relates to employees. So this isn't even about, external, to your point. This is how a business operates internally, because those internal controls, when violated, can be crippling to the business. So, I saw this list and I felt somewhat validated for the things that we've been talking about for the last, whatever, 8, 9 months. But it's packaged up really well. But yet, Campbell, I'll go back. I agree with your assertion that there still needs to be a question about the the people internally, and how the business itself operates.
So Mike, I want to go back to your $10 million AI supplier. Um, the reality is it could be a $1 trillion AI supplier, right? And so I don't usually go this direction on the technical side, but this also is a deployment discussion, because if you're depending on an external model and it's going to be a mission critical solution, maybe that's not the right choice. Maybe you should be deploying the model internally and control the end-to-end solution. The other comment I'll make is that, Campbell, what I got from what you were talking about, and Mike, you as well, and we do this pretty well on the podcast, a lot of these analysts and pundits forget about the human aspect. So I just saw a post and I responded to it about what happens when the model looks good, the results were good, and the human just passes over the loop. The human in the loop passes over and says it looks good, and then something gets executed and it's wrong. It's not just a human, it's a really failure at the very beginning, right? The human wasn't trained correctly. The model probably wasn't chosen. The whole thing was broken, not just, it's not the human in the loop that is the failure, it's the overall discussion of how you implement it, not just from the technology, but the human impact as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Humans are going to do what humans do, and that includes not adhering to a policy, forgetting
Yeah.
the policy, just flat out ignoring the policy. But none of that excuses or allows for the potential impacts. Like, we know that there is massive risk for all the benefit that we talk about with AI, that there is also massive risk that I don't think we've seen before. Even, and bring your own appliance, bring your own data. None of that was as potentially impactful, because it was, you would be isolated to an employee or maybe a group. Where this has an ability, this AI has an ability to dramatically impact a business on the whole. And I feel like oftentimes businesses rush into it, or they are treating the acquisition and implementation of AI tools like any other technology they've ever had.
Yeah, it's the 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 other thing that comes into the mix, and it's interesting because, as I said, I agree with the 10 questions because it broadens the, let's just, opens the aperture, let's call it that way. But there's a couple of things that are still missing. If we look at what we mean by a board, we're all assuming that that is a board of a privately held company or a publicly traded company. But there are boards that sit on charitable organizations. There are boards that sit on not-for-profit. There are boards with, government-run entities. So the perspectives of boards is very broad and mixed, and that falls back to something that I saw missing. Again, I don't necessarily have a pure answer for it, but there's the board is making a decision, maybe answering those 12 questions, maybe answering some more. They're getting external advice, but they're still making a decision that is sort of insulated. And as I said, there's not that social piece, but the other piece that's missing is there any veto capability external to the board? Because the board may make a terrible decision.
Hmm.
But is there the ability for some mechanism of external veto? I mean, so not no not what I'm talking about. I guess the sales selling the veto process, but the VETO.
My mind actually went there.
Yeah, I
Excellent.
know. Uh, too many sales training courses.
Yeah.
Um, but there has to be additional mechanisms due to the difference of AI versus, let's say, shadow IT, or the board making a decision on, strategy and direction.
Yeah.
AI it's part of the organization, it's part of the board's decision making capability, but it broadens the aspect of what it means to, and Brian, to your point, to incorporate the human aspect of it. And how do you do that? Is there a customer advisory board that has the ability, sorry, not board, customer advisory organization of that company that has the ability to not necessarily veto, but provide external perspective to the board? Are there additional mechanisms? Is there you know, a consolidation of employees that have representation to the board as well? So the board needs to be more open to external input and potential veto capability in the, sort of in the from the perspective of things if they're going to be going wrong. That's just my point of view on that one
So,
too.
so Campbell, you and Mike, I think, hit on something that I maybe had not considered. This is what makes AI different. You can't imagine a CTO would go to the board and say, we need a supply chain solution or whatever, and here's the recommendation. Everyone agrees or doesn't agree, and then we're going to go implement SAP or whatever it is, right?
Mhm.
But that's a business decision first that we needed it. Everybody agreed. They went through the process. The CTO goes ahead and does whatever he or she is tasked to do. But whoever owns the B2B, whatever the model, the business side is involved and the decision moves forward. The issue with AI is it has to be business first and it needs to be in the room all the time as part of that early decision making process. So you need to have a view of the world that um, how does there needs to be, I think we talked about before, there needs to be a chief of AI or something, and that person or maybe it's a committee in this case, has both an understanding, understands the business and the potential impact, both positive and negative, and it needs to be in that boardroom. I don't know how you get that's got, and they need to have um, either either a colleague needs to have that veto right or something to make sure that there is, if we have guardrails for AI, we need to have guardrails of AI in the boardroom as well.
I'm going to tell you guys as we wrap this thing up, I put a bow on this because I think we're getting close to time. the recommendation, and it dawned on me, Campbell, listening to you, and just reflecting on this conversation, it's the gap in what needs to be done is companies need an AI board. They actually, but with combination internal, external, but every business right now needs an AI board that is looking at these decisions. If they've been implemented, are we safe? Have we made the right choices? Have we protected ourselves? And then going forward, every AI decision has to go through the board, period. And that is like line one in your AI policy manual. It must go through the AI board before any solution is implemented in the organization, top to bottom, side to side.
Yeah, I just had one more thought. Maybe there's a chief of AI and a chief of governance, and they're peers. So you have somebody who understands the issue and the potential impact that can bring that to the board and contain a bad choice. So I learned something today.
I learned a lot. I got a lot to think about over the weekend while I'm fishing.
Yeah, I just wanted to just add one question, and I did sort of write this down. So are boards treating AI's impact on the labor, the judgment, and the organizational power as a technical transition when it really is a strategical and political choice that they're making in what they're doing? And again, great series of 12 questions. I completely agree with them. I just think it starts to really open more questions, unfortunately, for boards. And to your point, it depends on the type of board, organizationally how it's structured. But I think that they're going to have to continue to keep asking questions.
Hopefully,
open the Pandora's box on this one.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. This is one train wreck we can see coming. Where in previous IT generations, it sort of showed up, and then we went, "Oh, look at that!
Oh, look at that train wreck." Yeah. Yep. Well, listen, guys, thank you, and to all of our listeners, thank you very much. We always appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.